Hello, my name is Ian Weston. I run Weston Instruments in Ottawa, Canada. I basically repair guitars for a living. I trained as a guitar maker in England as at the Totnes School of Guitar Making in Totnes, England. I learned how to make guitars without any machines at all. I thickness planed and joined my first guitar with chisels and planes. I then spent 5 years in a repair shop in Montreal doing nothing but repair. It was just a repair shop, no instrument sales or anything like that. We just fixed guitars. And I've been running my own business since 2011. So it's been 10 years of running my own business. I purchased a Plek machine 6 years ago. And then 4 years ago, I was invited by Plek to become part of the service and support team. So as much as I use a Plek machine, I also help people when they call me up in using their Plek machine. I maintain Plek machines in factories and in small shops. So I can tear this sucker down to its bare bones and put it back together. And I wanted today to focus on demystifying what a Plek machine can do. Because if you Google around or YouTube around, I'm sure you can find a buttload of videos of seeing all that bunch of junk move around and do stuff. But I wanted to focus on what you're seeing on the screen share, which is what you as the luthier, or luths, as you ladies and gentlemen call yourselves, can actually do with a Plek machine. So I'll just run through what the tool heads are so you can understand what you can do. It's a vertical CNC mill that is designed to work on the playing surface of guitar-shaped objects. So guitars fit in the cradle door over here, and this bunch of junk moves around. There's 3 tool heads. The top one is the high-frequency spindle, which goes up to 60,000 RPM. It has a pneumatic chuck, and you can change a whole bunch of tools with it. So I've got everything from a little diamond cutter for fingerboard leveling, a 2mm down spiral bit. I've got this is a 1mm ball end bit. I've got a 0.6mm down spiral for a bunch of stuff. In the middle, we have what is the most important part of the Plek machine, which is the sensor finger. The sensor finger will locate where the strings are, where the string spacing is, where the edge of the fingerboard is, what the height of each fret is under each string, within a tolerance level of plus or minus 2/10,000ths of an inch. 2/10,000ths of an inch being 1/50th the diameter of the high E string on your electric guitar. And that's a concept that a lot of people sometimes lack. Sometimes I'll say things, I don't want to be patronizing, but there's some core concepts that some people may or may not have. And one of the important ones is tolerance. There's no such thing as perfection in any field of manufacturing, engineering. There is your target, which would be 0. And then there is tolerance. How far are you able to tolerate or able to achieve said 0? A Plek machine tolerance is 2/10,000ths of an inch per tool pass. And so with the top tool, the high frequency spindle, we can level a fingerboard, slot a fingerboard, cut a fingerboard for inlay, cut a nut shelf. On an acoustic guitar, we can slot the bridge, we can locate the bridge pin holes, and we can also machine nuts and saddles. So this is my little mandolin. We can do stuff like make a nut on the fly. For this instrument, all I did was put in a nut blank, tall blank, square, rough. And I put it in the machine and I set my parameters, and I'll do a nut pre-cut, and I can set the height that I want, the splay that I want, string spacing that I want, string gauge that I want, and the machine will then proceed and machine the nut. It will give it a top radius, it will give it a slant, it will cut all the slots to the depth that I desire. So once that's done, usually what I do is I'll take the instrument, I'll put it in the vise, I'll put 3 layers of masking tape on either side of the nut, I'll shape it off with a file, then 220 grit, 400 grit, and then I move on to micro mesh because I like things that are really shiny. On older instruments, I'll use a layer of low tack before I move on to the masking tape, just for insurance purposes. So when it comes to things like fret slot cutting, you can cut a radius fret slot. So like on this particular instrument, which I've been making for myself for like 6 years, very close, as you can tell. So the fret slots are only 1/10 of a millimeter deeper than the fret tang, and they match the radius of the fretboard perfectly. Also, they are not through slots, as you can see, which is something that you can do. You don't have to do it, but you can do the same with nut. So let's say you have a jazz bass that the nut was actually sheared off, broken, or the nut shelf is a complete and total dumpster fire and you want to clean it up. You can actually recut the nut shelf within the binding of the instrument. And so that's kind of an end result view. And so I'm going to move over there and I'll give you, well, actually, no, before I move over there, any quick questions as to tool heads and processes? Good, so I'll come back here later. And give you, so some of you guys already are into CNC, so you know a bit more about the bones of a CNC. This is a Y-axis stepper motor for a Plek machine. I'd say it weighs about close to 20 pounds. It's big and heavy. That was actually a faulty unit that I had to replace for another Plek machine owner up here in Canada. This is the fret cutter for a Plek machine. It's solid carbide. It's a proprietary cutter, but it is sharpened in-house either in Berlin or at Joe's shop in Nashville. It's composed of 3 shapes. Think of it as a crowning file, but the crowning file is both leveling and shaping at the same time. We have a top shape for narrow frets, a middle shape for either very wide or very low frets, because it's a very shallow cut, and we have a bottom shape, which would be your standard jumbo crowning file. Right. Well, I could jump onto the screen share now.
Joe, just 1 second. Joe put a question in the chat. What is your rough time from start to finish on a nut when you're making it with the Plek machine, like that mandolin nut? How long did what soup to nuts? Where are you at?
So that would be the nut pre-cut. The nut pre-cut is about it's 7 to 8 minutes machine time. Mm-hmm. And the most important thing, which I didn't get until I was at Joe Glazer's shop to see the machine, is when the guy that was running the Plek showing me how he was making a nut, setting the machine to make a nut, and then the machine started, and then he said, "We're going to lunch." Yeah. And then when we came back, the nut was made.
Yay! That's cool.
So it's to me, the machine is my first employee. I don't sit around and just look at it while it's working. I do other stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, during my customer intake days, I usually try and get a few guitars just processed, because this does not replace you. You still have work to do on your bench. But when I have a couple guitars processed at the end of my customer intake day, when I come back to my regular work days, I have a couple guitars started. So then I'll keep processing guitars and I keep working at my bench. And there's 2 of us working. There's me and a robot, and we're both working.
Ian, what kind of cutters are you using for nut slots? Is it a super small one, and the machine just?
It's a 0.3 millimeter cone cutter.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And does it do the sides of the nut, or you're shaping that first?
That's a manual gig.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah. So you fit the blank as you fit blanks right now. And after that, it will do the top. It does a straight slant, but radius to whatever you pick.
Right.
And after that, you shape it and finish it to your heart's desire.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Do you want to take it back over and do your thing? Am I live? You're live.
All right. So what I want to focus on is demystifying what you can do with the Plek, because I've gotten the impression through the years that most people think you're kind of tied to a standard that someone else has imagined for you, which is simply not true. When we train new users, what we do give them a direction, we do give them certain standards, because you can now see and do things which you only had the imagination to do at first, but now you can actually accomplish it. And we don't want to encourage you to do some really wacky stuff with your brand new machine, which your customers will then receive the work of and not satisfied. So we give you training wheels and you start with that, but then as you build experience, you really can do anything on a Plek machine. And the greatest thing is the eyes you have. So I'm going to walk you through the screen you're going to be in the most, which is this one. This is the virtual fret dress. And we have one box per string that has been scanned. And we can see two different colors. So the green is what you are trying to achieve. The green would be your toolpath. And orange is what is reality. It's what's in the machine. This is the first fret. This is the 12th fret. This is the fret height. When it is green, it's final height after processing. When it's orange, it is also final height after processing, but because it's orange, it means you haven't actually machined that fret. And red means you should be paying attention, because if you do this, some bad things could happen, so you better be sure. This is an example of scanning a guitar and making sure you can or cannot dress it. Because it does happen that you get a guitar in that is simply not dressable. This is a Rickenbacker. And once you have a machine, you get used to these kinds of profiles, because this is what a lot of Rickenbackers look like. With a Titan truss rod, you got a back bow between fret 4 and 10. You've got a ridiculous ski jump, and you have frets that measure almost nothing. So if I take that away, see, this is the original fret height as they are. We got 33 thousandths at the first fret. We have 27 thousandths height at the last fret on the high E. Even less on the low E. We have 22 thousandths for a final fret. Again, a ridiculous ski jump. So this is extreme enough that if you were to put this in a neck jig and run a straight edge, you could probably diagnose this as undressable. But here, I can just confirm it. And also I can share this screen with my customer next to me. Like, he can also see it. It's a great way to share what it is you are understanding of the workpiece and why the customer should take your advice. In this case, it was, buddy, we should refret it. Because even if I were to give this guitar absolutely no fall away, so that's 0, 0, try to dress this and just kiss the tops of the frets. So I'm just manipulating my tool path because I can do that.
Ian, so was the initial shape there of the green of your dream endpoint, was that kind of a preset that you that was already built into the machine?
No, it's built into my preferences. So when I build the instrument file, I build it with what my ideal target is. Okay. So different shops have different ideal targets, different players have different ideal targets. So I have my starting point, which is what I would like to achieve. Of course, I have to manipulate it more often than not, but it's what I would like to shoot for. And in this case, I am so far removed from what I would like to achieve, and I still can't do it. If you look at this high E string, I'm looking at 15 thousandths height for my my 22nd fret on the low E. And I know for a fact that even my lowest cutter, you see my lowest cutter is 0.5 millimeters deep. And this fret would be 0.37 millimeters by the time I'm done, which means I will have put some really nasty marks in that fingerboard if I were to click go. And although if I do click go, I'm going to get a whole bunch of bells and alarms. Like, Christopher's going to be quite angry at me, but Christopher will do what I tell him, and he will butcher this guitar if I tell him to butcher this guitar.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. So this is an example of a guitar that's not dressable and that I ended up refretting. So what I did is I planed the fingerboard first. You get the same virtual fret dress for a fingerboard plane. So this would be after the fingerboard was machined. And now at least I have a surface that I can work with.
Do you have your starting point for the fingerboard there? Was the fingerboard?
Yeah. So my starting point for the fingerboard, this is what it looked like without any tension.
Boy, that looks pretty rough.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
And so a lot like frets, like you don't necessarily want to bring a fingerboard down to next to nothing. Is there any kind of like, do you have to like do some measurements to
so that is
like what the thickness of the fingerboard is to start with?
So the thickness of the fingerboard, that's a you job. You have to measure your edges. You have to take an educated guess or remove an inlay to measure your depth of inlay. Okay. Because just like doing this by hand, you're removing material. You're just removing it with a lot more precision and control than you did before, but you're still removing material. You will lose inlays if you're not careful. You will end up with no fingerboard or no fret slots if you're not careful. But this will tell you how much you're removing from the top. Okay. So I'm going to set this in inches. So these white boxes are tens of thousands of inches. So 555 here means 5.5 thousandths of an inch. So very little. And if I were to plane this fingerboard with this particular profile, here I'd be removing 17.8 thousandths or 18 thousandths, which is perfectly acceptable for this particular instrument. Yeah. If I were to process it like this. But yes, you have to, it takes people a while to get used to looking at these numbers and understanding what they mean, but this is just removal. And it's the same when you're doing frets. If you're doing just regular frets, so let's say this one here. So this is just frets. And frets come in imperial, so I think of frets as imperial. So here, 6.9 thousandths or 7 thousandths would be what I'm removing off of this first fret. Oh, here's actually a really fun thing to discuss. This is a shape that I see very, very often, this kind of Nike type swoosh towards the first fret. This happens when you are doing a lot of fret removal manually and you don't remove the nut and you don't carry your tool past the first fret, or you're not able to be as aggressive over the first few frets. And I see this all the time on guitars that have been dressed manually. A nice deep dish from frets 4 to maybe 7, and then everything gets straight again. So that's one thing to consider when you're doing a manual fret dress, is not taking your tool off of the first so much, or when it's possible or easy to do, taking the nut off of the instrument and being able to carry your tool the whole way so that you can actually end up with a nice straight line. And absolute control. So once you get used to the controls, you can do anything you want to this particular fingerboard. If you wanted to do that, there you go. There's some nice destruction for you.
What kind of cut would that wind up giving you?
Here I'm down to 6 thousandths for my final fret height, so you would be lacking a significant portion of fingerboard as well. Yeah, you will have vandalized this instrument quite well if you were to do it like this. Can
we talk really quick about the radius stuff down at the bottom? I see fret 1, fret 12, fret 22. Is that and so you've got also the orange for your like where it sits, and then the green for where it's up. Does it also have like an indication of how much you'll be removing, or do you just figure that out by looking at the
So if you look at the screen, so let's say 12th fret over here, if I drag this down, see 8 thousandths removal? Yeah. That number is mirrored over here. Okay, cool. It's the same number. So as you look at the screen more and more and more, yes, you kind of see it in 3 dimensions in your head, but it does take some getting used to. So if I take down the first fret here, 65 or 6.5 thousandths, 65, 6.5 thousandths. So I'll use these numbers a lot when I'm doing fingerboard plane, and I want to make sure that if I am correcting a twist that I'm taking the right amount off one side or the other, or if I want to avoid creating a twist, that I'm not creating one.
Ian, are all of these numbers being done under string tension or not?
Whether you are doing it under string tension or not, those numbers will be there. This is a strung up scan. So the instrument was under tension when I performed this scan. And you can process an instrument with or without tension. I would advise that you do with, because you will start, well, it's just that's the whole point of the system, is doing it with, so that you have your perfect result when you're strung back up.
So but you don't have a neck jig in there. It's basically calculating it with tension, and then you take the strings off, and then the cutter goes. Like, you're not.
Yeah. So once you take the string tension off, you strap the guitar into the cradle, and there are several securing techniques. And just like a CNC machine, jigging and fixturing is paramount, because the axis of here will hold two 10,000s all day long. It really gives no shits. It will hold two 10,000s. But if your workpiece is loose, so if your neck is not secured properly, if your frets are not secured properly, you will not achieve the result you desire. And I have some scans I want to show you too, as to how you can diagnose those things. So this was done under string tension. Let's talk about jigging and fixturing. So I had WE120, W120, that's U. And that was version 8 I want to show you. So this is a final scan after I processed this particular guitar. And well, you see my, doesn't look right, does it? I mean, we're talking about 2.3, 2.5, 3,000s, but it's not what I'm looking for, is it? It's not perfect.
Wait a second. Can you back up just a skosh? What are we looking at that isn't perfect?
So this is a final scan. I've already dressed this guitar once, and I've strung it back up, and now I am checking for quality.
Okay. And so the orange line is,
it's still rigidy. It's still not it's just not great. When you look at say the bass side, things are nice and even from fret to fret. When you go up and down from tension, it's normal and expected for the neck to spring a little, and you'll see a slight variation in the profile. But from fret to fret, like on this E string, you can see that from fret to fret, we're good. But on the high E, we're not. It's gross. My 3,000s over here. And the reason being is that I assumed, and we all know what assume does, makes an ass out of you and me. I assumed that the frets were properly seated on this instrument. I ran a feeler gauge under them before, see if they fit. I have 2000s feeler gauge, did not fit. But no, I'm not happy with this end result. So what I did is I put the instrument back on the bench. I glued in all the frets, and then I reprocessed the instrument with the frets glued in. And now my lines line up.
So you have QC and problem solving built into this as well. Like something has to give there. Your line didn't match up, and so the natural thing that you're going to look at is the seating of the fret, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I have another one that's even more obvious, and that was WE1920 or 1917. This one. So this is a Larrivee guitar, a made in Canada Larrivee guitar. They've moved to the States since, and I have learned from experience that unfortunately made in Canada Larrivee guitars pretty much have the worst fretwork money can buy. This is the stock fretwork off of this Larrivee guitar.
And they aren't even shiny either.
No, they are poorly seated. They are rigidy. This is just music stores do better work than this. But anyway, so I processed this guitar once. I'm on the 1917. I wanted to look at version 8. I processed this guitar once after I glued in all the frets, because I know it's a Larrivee. I got to glue these frets in. And if you follow my Instagram, I've made a video of how I glue frets with bore oil and a Q-tip. So I have minimal cleanup to do. And so I try not to have glue all over the place and not spend my whole day cleaning up. And the side effect of that is on this particular instrument, you can see fret 1 and 2 are still off target, especially fret 2, still off target. So I put my looker closer spectacles on and I look at the surface finish of fret number 2, and from very close up, I can tell there's a difference in the surface finish. It's a little bit rigidy. I describe it as the backbone of a sardine. Like it's not clean compared to the other frets, which were nice and smooth, which means that I screwed up. I didn't put enough glue on that fret. It was not seated well enough for me to achieve my result. So back to the bench, glue the fret in again, process the instrument, and there we go. I got it.
Cool. Can you go back to the previous screen really quick? So the 1 through 12 is the iterations of times that you've looked at the the guitar.
So every single number here is a scan, either under tension or not under tension, because every time you close the door and intend to do something to the instrument, whether it's measuring or actual cutting, the machine needs to locate the workpiece. It needs to know where stuff is.
So how long does it take to do a scan, just out of curiosity?
3 minutes.
Okay.
Also, if this guitar comes back to you, is this going to go back in and then produce scan 13? Like if it comes back a year later, like will you have all of the previous iterations?
I would create a new version at that point.
Okay.
So it would create a number 2 up here and a new arrow down here. So that way I can keep my history kind of organized. When you're doing separate processes like a refret, so this is a refret that I've been working on. It's the one in the door, actually. So scan number 1 is intake scan. You can use this tool however the hell you want, but the way I function is I always take a scan of the guitar as the customer gave it to me. So that if ever we need to have a conversation about what the initial instrument was or what the final target is, it solves a lot of disagreements if you have a scan of the instrument within 2/10,000ths of an inch, so you can actually show them what went on. So my first scan is my intake scan. That's as the instrument came in. Then back to the bench, I pull the frets and I do a fingerboard leveling. That's my second version. My third version does not have a complete scan because that's the nut pre-cut. The nut pre-cut only works off of the 2 first frets. It's actually really fast and surprisingly accurate. You can make a nut down to final height like that. You just put it in there with a blank, you make your file, you pull the trigger, and 5 minutes later, you've got a nut that just needs finishing, but the height's done. And you control whatever string spacing you want, distance from the edge, amount of splay, all that fun stuff. You control that. So that's my version number 3. Version number 4 has 1 scan. That is my initial scan after refretting under string tension. So this is what my refret looks like before I actually process the frets. So these are the lessons I've learned from owning a Plek machine, is how to put frets in. I can promise you that my first refrets with the Plek machine did not look like this. So I said, I have not yet leveled the frets, but this is what my fret seating looks like. I am barely going to touch them. Just going to make sure everything's okay. But still, the fret seating is better than it is on most instruments for sale in music stores.
What would you say those, like what were some of your big takeaways on seating that you got into? Did you like all of a sudden switch to arbor pressing, or did you change your hammering technique? Or
a lot of practice, a lot of different techniques, mixing between presses and hammers.
Yeah.
The materials vary too. Like you get fantastic results on nickel with a hammer. Yeah. I find that for nickel frets, the best precision you're going to get is with a hammer. Evo frets as well. Evo loves being hammered in. Stainless steel, not so much. Stainless steel, if you want to get, well, this is a stainless job. If you want a result like you see on the screen, you need to use your presses. You're just not going to get it with a hammer. It never happens. It springs back too much. It just doesn't stay where you put it with a hammer.
So can I ask you a little bit about your intake process? Like, do you you like, I mean, do you look at every guitar with the customer there on the initial scan? Like, is that part of your workflow, or do you like email them the data, or how do you communicate this information with the customer typically?
So I don't go into as much detail with the customer as I am with you guys today, because I compare it to you're showing the results of an MRI to a 12-year-old. It's like you can't have a conversation. My typical conversation at the counter is I use one of these, and for instruments that are pretty good, so they'll have a little bit of fret wear. The one thing that I can show them on the counter that they understand right away is the relief differential. And as you guys all know, if you use one of these often enough, most guitars will have more relief on the treble side than on the bass side, which is exactly the opposite.
The opposite, yeah.
Yeah. And so if I have a combination of fret wear, or if I sight the neck and I can see that there are humps, divis, and there are uneven frets, and I use this guy and I have a relief differential, that's when the customer understands that a basic setup is not going to be money well invested. And that's one of the things that I often do at the counter. Many people book in for just a basic setup, and I take these measurements at the counter, I measure the action. Sometimes I'll even test the truss rod. Well, no, actually half the times I'll test the truss rod, move the neck relief, use my fancy little gizmo. And I'm just honest with them. I'm like, I'm not going to book this in for a setup. It's just not worth it. It's not worth my time. It's not worth your money. You're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
Paying me $110 for your setup. It's going to be clean. It'll have new strings, but it's not going to be better.
Yeah.
If you really want to feel like you're getting something done to your guitar, we have to do fret work. And this is just as true if you don't have a Plek machine. I mean, if you have 10 thousandths relief on the treble side, 5 thousandths relief on the bass side, worn frets, and a ski jump at the end, you're taking someone's money for no reason. You're not going to give them a nice job.
Yeah, one of the things, this is maybe a little bit for a question for later, but I think I'll ask it now because it's on my mind. But so I'm watching you talk about this, and like, you could you train somebody that has no idea, like hasn't had all the background in manual fretting first and really done a lot of thinking about it? Could you train them to use this machine just as a kind of a, as a job, or does it really take, it seems like you still have to have these kind of like experiential,
Can you train the great thing about it is if you have, let's say, a helper, they don't need your experience to deliver a very good result.
Okay.
But I can promise you that 9 out of 10 Plek owners don't even deliver the results I deliver because they're not as crazy as I am.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I do not take myself seriously, not at all. I'm a bit of an idiot, but I take my job a little too seriously.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that works.
Yeah, so it only amplifies the existing ability of the operator.
Mm-hmm.
You give someone like Doug or yourself or Evan this machine, of course you're going to be better than the guy that just graduated from Gallup.
Cool.
Because you know this stuff. You know what target you're shooting for, except now you can hit the nail on the head every single time.
Okay, well, keep going on what you want to talk about, because I'm just interjecting stuff.
I'll share again. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you guys know Valenti guitars, Italian builder. And I gotta give the guy credit. He builds beautiful, beautiful instruments. Like, he did a nice violin recurve on this double cut custom for a customer of mine. Like, absolutely fantastic builder. And I can tell from looking at the scan of his fretwork. So this is the Valenti. You can tell by looking at the scan of the fretwork that this person had experience, and they were shooting for a target which was probably the exact same target as mine, but they were blind. Like, they know what they want to achieve and they're trying their darndest to achieve it, but they just don't have the vision that I have with the sensor finger to actually achieve it. So this was just out of the box. Let's see what it was with one with one truss rod adjustment, it's a little too tight. So you can see he was pretty darn close to that compound relief. So I'm just rolling through the treble side to the bass side. And he did a pretty good job of getting compound relief. But what he did for fall off, I mean, we're at 26 thousandths of fall off below what I would set for fall off. He's a long way down.
Can we back up just a second and talk about compound relief? That's not a term I'm familiar with. Maybe that's my own issue, but.
So as I mentioned earlier, more relief on the treble than on the bass is the
Oh,
opposite
okay.
of what you want.
Yes.
So compound relief is basically having the optimal amount of relief under each string for each string gauge and tuning.
Okay.
And you want less relief on the treble and more relief on the bass.
Yes. Okay.
Depending on the amount of strings, the string gauge, and the tuning, that differential will be greater or smaller. I'm usually at just like 1/1000th and a half difference between the treble and the bass. Unless I'm working on an 8th string, like I did last week, where I'm more like a 3/1000th difference between the 1st string and the 8th string.
Cool.
And again, these are not templates that you get in a Plek machine. It's just me taking an educated guess after having done close to 2,000 instruments in here, saying, this is where I need to go with this, because I've done a bunch of wacky profiles, which, you know what, didn't work. You know, I had those crazy ideas of, oh, this is how it should look. You can like this over here. I'm going to start to fall off over here on this string and over there on that string. And anyway, you can go completely insane with it and deliver a very poor result with extreme accuracy.
Ian, I have a technical question about the machine.
Yes, sir.
When it's performing its cutting, I understand that you're showing us scans before and after you're calling process, which I presume is cutting.
Yes.
So when the machine is cutting and you're showing us these profiles of relief, as fretters, most all of us who aren't doing something in a machine are adjusting our necks straight so that when we're doing our cutting, whether we're putting in relief or taking it out, we're starting from zero and moving in a direction. When you're cutting in the machine, are you straightening the neck to profile, or are you dialing in relief as you would have it under string tension, and then it's taking material off the tops?
So the way the brain of the machine works, I understand your question, and I'll try to answer it as clearly as I can. No, not this one. This is too much. So back to the guitar that I just refretted that needs cutting. So this is the scan under tension, and this is the shape, the final shape that I want to achieve. All right. So let's say I've set my dress. No, I'm gonna flatten that out a bit. I want to touch all the frets. Okay, that's a quick bird's eye set, and I would hit continue if I was in a process. When I hit continue, I'm prompted to open the door, remove the strings from the instrument, secure the neck into the door, and then close the door. I do not touch the truss rod. I do not change the profile of that neck from under tension to unstrung, because the way the brain of the machine works, it remembers each single one of these numbers. So it's going to remove 7.3 thousandths of an inch from fret 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, from fret number 7 under the high E string. It will remove 4.5 thousandths of an inch from the 12th fret under the A string. And it will make sure that it will join all of those points with the radius that was dictated. And then when the cutting process is finished, you unstrap the neck, you string it back up to tension, and in an ideal world, those two lines will line up perfectly. When they don't line up perfectly, it could be because the truss rod is pinched. It could be because the truss rod has liberated itself when it became without tension. It can be loose frets, as we've gone over. There's a myriad of reasons why the two lines wouldn't overlap.
Sure.
And
So how does the machine compensate for the difference of the shape of a neck under tension when it took the scan and off tension when it's cutting? Or is it just trying to take material?
So when you close the door and you've secured the neck, it scans the guitar again. It relocates the entire workpiece and treats every single point on each fret as its separate workpiece. It doesn't care where fret 12 is relative to where it was previously. It doesn't care about that. All it wants to know is where is fret 12 now and how much material am I going to have to remove from where the low E string is.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Mhm.
It sounds pretty accurate. I mean, my instinct is that that's going to be, I mean, that's just going to be probably more reliable than just about anything, I would imagine.
It is, but what it teaches you is that when those two lines don't overlap, it's not his fault. It's my fault, and it's up to you to accept that it is your fault, and no one's going to explain to you why it's wrong. You kind of have to figure it out. You're like, okay, well, why? This is how I learned that refretting with Evo. If you're not gluing your frets in, don't bother leveling them. For some reason, Evo, it will not stay in the fingerboard. It's slippery stuff. It was my third fret dress, I think, in this machine, where it was an Evo that I had refretted. And I remember it was fret 15. Fret 15 was popping up on the initial scan, process the instrument, restring, everything's perfect except fret 15's popped up again. I'm like, well, son of a bitch, I guess this Evo stuff just really wants to be glued down.
Jessica fretware in general, I feel like their barbs are unreliable too. Like they're just very sharp. I have all kinds of rituals I have to engage in to get Jessica wire to stay in. But
yeah, I like actually taking the fret barber and setting it pretty wide and just knocking the tip off of the barb.
Yeah,
I find I get a much more reliable seating.
Yeah, I think a mauled barb I think is more reliable. Okay, sorry to get you sidetracked there, but continue on.
All right, do we have any questions? Nothing in chat box. Nope. Okay, where can I go to next? Yeah, I could really use some questions.
Yeah, well, we could get on to the we've actually been going at this for just a little bit under an hour. One of the Penachars, Sean Penachar, wants to know about the cutter profiles and shapes. Is there more cutter profiles available aftermarket? Like, can you get Mando wire cutters and banjo wire cutters?
There are several cutter profiles. So this is what we call our standard service cutter. So it's from the years of experience and customer feedback. This is the best combination of 3 shapes that a repair shop will need.
Okay.
Manufacturers often have their very own shapes. Like Gibson has 3 identical shapes. They use the same fret wire all day long. So it's the same shape 3 times. Collings is the only manufacturer that actually processes each one of their mandolins. And because the mandolins, those little frets are so close together, they only have 1 profile. It's just 1 blade, so they can get to all the frets. And TJ Thompson has his own custom cutter because he does a lot of bar fret wire, which has its own shape. So he has his own custom cutter for that. So yes, if you desire to have a pyramid shaped or square shaped, we'll make it for you.
So what also, like, so you got narrow and wide with that multi-purpose cutter. So is that going to get you through most, like, is there going to be a difference between, like, say if you're running Jessica or Stu Mac fretwire, does it care about either one? Is there like the narrow is like, it's good for 80 thousandths widths and that's it, like 85 or 78?
No, I do 95. I do 95s with my narrow. You do 95
cutter. With, yeah, like, what's the swing and what's the swing on widths with that?
As absolute control. You can dive into the preferences and you can take the narrow cutter and you can process a wide fret with it, and you can put a nice set of train tracks down the middle if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's all up to you.
Okay.
You control all of your feeds and speeds. So when we're doing fingerboard leveling, say you've got a Les Paul Custom with a big block inlays, you need a very high step over to process that instrument and end up with a good result, because the pearl is so hard that if you're going with a loose step over, say 10% to 80% step over, it pushes the neck back.
What is step over?
So step over is the amount of the previous tool pass that will be left alone.
Oh, okay,
so let's say you've got a 3mm cut, you're cutting 3mm. The next tool pass, if you're on a 10% step over, will be 2.7mm of that original pass will be passed over. And if you're at 100% step over, you're not even touching that other 3mm line. So your 3mm cutter is passing through and cutting all the material.
Ted wanted to know about partial refrets. You know, one of the reasons why, I mean, I quit doing partial refrets years ago because getting the plane of the new frets into the plane of the old frets, I felt like was more trouble than it was worth. And I think a lot of repair guys don't do partials for that reason.
It's really tricky.
Do partial refrets, is that something that you're willing to contemplate with this machine, or is it still just more trouble than it's worth?
They're not more trouble than they're worth. The result is suboptimal, and the conversation with the customer is had to inform them that the result will be suboptimal. Okay. But again, I can't spend their money for them.
Okay.
I can tell them sometimes it's like, yes, I need to do fret work on this instrument, but you don't have enough fret wire for me to do that. I can do a partial refret or I can do a full refret. The partial refret is a compromise, but it will reflect in the price.
Evan wanted to know the power requirements. Ian. Is that running 110 or 220?
It depends if it's you're a European customer or a North American customer. Okay. Mine runs 110.
Okay. Hey, Devlin, I think he was talking about the frets that as they get smaller and smaller on a mandolin extension.
No, they get closer and closer together, and they're just so close that this guy, which is 10mm from top to bottom, can't do the last frets on the mandolin because the other shapes are going to run into the opposing frets. You need a very narrow cutter to be able to process a mandolin with the fret cutter.
Ah, yes.
I think handle partial frets. You know the frets when you cut away on a mandolin, that the higher frets get smaller and smaller. And
you can. That's part of your instrument file. You can do that on guitars, mandolins, on whatever has frets. You tell your instrument file which frets are partial, so under which string they are, and you'll process the partial frets.
Okay. I think that's what he meant. I'm not sure. Maybe you can, but I think.
So I can go back and I can say instrument file.
Thanks,
so
Ted.
I can do partial frets, and let's say I've got 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, and then those frets will be measured and cut if I create my instrument file as such.
Cool.
I can also cut them that way too if I'm doing a new fingerboard.
All right. Do we have all the brass tacks functionality of the thing situated? Should we move on to the financial aspect of it?
Yep.
Talk about that big initial investment. So the nice round number of I'm trying to close the window on your shared screen. I'm over here clicking furiously. So let's just say the price tag of 100K US. Let's just talk about that for a second, and then kind of what your financial flow is like in the shop, kind of surrounding that. And also, is financing available? I've heard rumors that you can kind of get on board and do something some kind of monthly payment thing, or I don't know.
Okay, so Plek, or Guitar and Technology GmbH, what the name of the company is, they do not offer financing directly. I have I went in Canadian dollars. Did I have $125,000 kicking around that I just said, here, have it? No, I didn't. I went to a bank and I got a loan. You can work either through a bank for a loan, or you can work through a leasing company. Honestly, in the United States of America, you have a lot more flexibility in the financial tools that you can get for this kind of thing. Canada has its advantages, but you can't open a bank with $50,000 in Canada. You just can't. And leasing companies, there's like 2 of them, whereas you probably have 2 in each city in your country that has population in it. We've got more bears than people, so it's a little challenging.
What I don't even know what a leasing company is. What does that mean?
A leasing company is a company that will buy the equipment for you and then extend the loan to you, where you give them payments. They hold the note on the machine until you've paid it off.
Okay.
It's like leasing a car, but you're not leasing it. You're leasing it third party as opposed to from the company that made it.
So what? And then if you go out of business, they got to figure out what to do with a Plek machine.
Luckily, the resale value on these things, like your investment, is quite protected. These things sell for like 80% of their original value on the used market, and they sell fast. I'm sorry?
Is there a big used market of those?
Maybe 2 of them come up every year, and they're usually for sale for less than a week.
So is that like something like you would know about? Like I would go to Ian's website and you'd say, hey, there's a used Plek for sale.
No, typically, so when you purchase a Plek machine, there is a clause in your purchase agreement where Plek would like the first right of refusal on a sale if you were to get rid of your machine. Plek will also broker the machine for you if you decide that, I can't find a buyer on my own, I need some help. But I said they're pretty rare, these sales, and when they happen, like, they're gone as fast as they show up. But if you were like, look, $100,000, I really can't. No way. It's a pipe dream. 80, maybe I can swing 80. Well, then you just let us know, and I'll put your note in my brain or in my phone. And if ever a used machine comes up for sale, I'm like, I had this guy that was interested a couple of years ago. Hey, you still want one? And it's either yay or nay. I mean, Iris Guitars. So Adam Bushwell's company just purchased a used machine last year. Can't remember who they bought it from. Was it from Westwood? I think they bought it from Westwood. But yeah, that was the last used sale. And again, that was like a week. We called like 5 people, and one of them took it.
So are you aware of how many Plek machines are active, say, in the US or in Canada at any given time?
There's actually a Plek world map on the Plek website. You can see where every single production or service machine is located.
And it would, if you were interested, it would probably behoove you. You wouldn't want to buy one if you were in a town with 5 other machines necessarily, right? Like,
so we don't have that kind of population density of machines, but we have discovered over time that having 2 machines in a city actually creates more awareness.
Okay.
And both do better.
Both do better for having 2. Okay.
Yeah. LA is a good example of that. Well, it was until Westwood sold their machine, because actually the whole store closed. So it wasn't just that; the whole operation closed down. But where else is there?
You're not blaming the Plek machine for that, right? It had something to do with the pandemic or something.
From Sean, we have a question, and I have Evan waving his hand wildly.
Okay.
Let me answer Sean. Does Plek per use once you own it, or do you reap all the profits? So you have the option to opt in or opt out of the monthly service plan. The monthly service plan allows you to call me or Joe or Germany, and trust me, in the first 3 months of you owning this machine, you're going to call us a lot. I get calls all the time. We'll show you how to do a fret slot process on the machine, but by the time you get your first job having to slot a fretboard, you'll be like, kind of forgot this. So you call us and we walk you through it. I can log into your machine remotely and I can help you out with that. Your monthly support plan, I'll have to look at the details. It's not hellaciously expensive. It's like $200 something a month. And that also gives you lower cost on resharpening and support, because unfortunately it is simply not realistic for us to be able to offer support and only make money off of machine sales. It's just not possible. But you can opt out. And so if you wanted help, and you would have to book an appointment with us, you would have to pay for time with us, and then we would service you as we would service anyone else.
What's the hourly rate to talk to you on the phone about Plek? Or
if you're not signed up for the support plan, it's billable in 15-minute increments, and it's $100 an hour. If you're not signed up. If you are signed up, and again, don't quote me on this, it's around $200 a month. I think you get 120 minutes of support included in that price.
So what are you charging? So somebody comes in, and of course it's going to be in Canadian, so I don't want to know what any of this means, but somebody comes in and they want a fret level, or you decide that they can't have a setup, they need a fret level. What's a fret level going for in one of these?
I know that like at Joe's place in Nashville, you're talking about $200 US roughly.
Okay.
Joe works off of an hourly rate. I think he's the only shop that still does that, where some of these processes are still billed by the hour. But I'm fixed fee. I charge 260 Canadian dollars, which or Canadian pesos, we should say. But it's around that, around $210, $220
Okay.
for a fret dress and setup.
And what?
So 260 is for the Plek job, and that includes a setup.
And again, you can offer whatever level of service you want. And
I'm just asking for clarification, because I'm just trying to understand your numbers.
So
if I were to break it down, I charge $110 for a basic setup.
Mhm.
And if the instrument does need a fret dress, that is $150. Will I do a fret dress without a setup? No, I will not.
No, I understand, but the differential between a Plek job with a setup as opposed to just a setup is $150 plus to go into the machine. Yeah.
And my setups are above and beyond. You have a 2-pneumatic bridge. I will file every individual saddle to make sure your strings match the radius of your fingerboard.
Nobody's questioning the quality of the setup. I'm just trying to understand the difference between a Plek plus setup as opposed to a setup. Understanding, of course, that your use of the Plek is ensuring a much more refined setup, because you're able to get the frets as
and I do I would say that in 80% of cases I glue the frets in. Like there's a few companies where I don't usually need to, like Fender US production and Gibson US production, Gibson Electric US production. I don't typically need to glue the frets in. Just about everything else needs their frets glued in, and that's part of the service.
So do you have a competition in your neighborhood that is Plekless and has a standard? Like, I'm just wondering, like, do you have a guy down the road that doesn't have a Plek and he's doing fret levels for, like, he's got a standard fee of say 100 Canadian?
Yeah, I've got they're usually, the local guy is 150 for a dress and setup, but I fix a lot of his shit too. So
you're just 50 bucks over what your competition is.
No, 100
over.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a substantial price thing. Like, one of the things that maybe is concerning is, when we talked earlier about you communicating with the customer, that it's like talking to a 12-year-old about an MRI. Like, do you feel like the average consumer, like, is able to appreciate the value that you're bringing to the instrument?
As the years go by, it becomes easier and easier. A, because I've got the practice dealing with the customer. B, because there's now 2,000 of the ones I've done out in the world, but also because there's more and more of these Plek machines out there. 6 years ago, when I bought my Plek machine, the majority of Plek's customers were manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the majority of Plek's customers are repair shops. It only took 6 years.
Yeah. Rob wanted, disappearing comment here. Rob wanted to know, do you do any pre-sale or warranty Plek work for local stores on shop stock before they hit the shelves, or is it purely your own repair clientele. Boy, if you had a Larrivee dealership in your neighborhood, you could probably you could probably just keep that. You probably need a second Plek machine, wouldn't
No,
you?
I don't work for music stores. Not that I refuse their work, but I do not make business arrangements with music stores simply because they want the work done faster than my private customers, and they want it for 20% off.
Yeah, that's
And
no disrespect to them, because it's got to be hard to be a retailer these
yes,
days.
absolutely. But I'm very fortunate. I don't know if it's because of my own doing or I'm just a lucky son of a bitch, but I've got 3,000 of my own customers, and they're all willing to pay my full price, and they're all willing to wait for me.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I have no reason to work for a music store.
Evan wanted to know about noise and mess. Is that thing noisy?
No.
Okay. And is it messy? Is it sending bits of nickel silver through, dispersing it throughout your shop?
Well, it should be contained, which shouldn't it?
That's the biggest mess. See it?
Yeah. You got a little bit of what is
and
it?
that's
Snarf?
400 guitars worth.
So let me ask you, just going back to the numbers again, because I'm curious about the finances of it. So you're based on the numbers that you were mentioning in terms of how many guitars you've run through over how many years. You're doing what, half a dozen or so levels and crowns a week, roughly on average, it sounds like. Are my numbers right?
Yeah, I do between 6 and 8 a week.
Okay.
And I can tell you so in my Canadian dollars, I put down probably around $10,000 or $12,000 of my own money when I bought it, and my loan was for like $110,000. And between the loan and the monthly Plek fee, I needed to process 8 guitars per month to cover that. So you're breaking my loan was like $1,535 a month was my loan.
The loan was for how many years?
7, but I managed to pay it off faster than that.
Okay. So over a 7-year period, you're going to have to process somewhere, or over a 6-year period, you're going to have to process somewhere between 700 and 800 guitars in order to turn the machine into profit.
Is that
the machine profited the first month I had it?
You can't. You have a debt.
You can on a monthly perspective. It costs me. It's like an employee. So it's like saying an employee's not profitable.
I understand where you're coming from. Everybody likes to look at numbers from one month to the next, but if you go out of business on the 6 months, you're still about $105,000 in debt. If you're looking at it from a purely business standpoint, if you're carrying a liability versus income, I just want to know at what point and how many years out, if you're dealing with a monthly inflow and outflow of having to break even on 6 to 8 guitars a month or whatever it is, at what point does the machine start paying you versus you paying it?
Well, I would think, Doug, like if it takes 8 to break even, but you're way more profitable on, if you do, whatever you do past that in the month, I mean, that stands to reason. Like
it's like having staff. It's the same. I've had 2 full-time staff, and it's the same thing, except minimum wage in this country, in this province, a minimum wage worker will cost you $3,200 a month at minimum wage. I can't hire anybody for minimum wage. Nobody will work for it. This guy will do 4 fret dresses a day, every day, and he doesn't care. And he cost me $1,500 a month.
Oh, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, the $100,000+ purchase for a $150 job, and how many of those $150 jobs I have to do until.
Well, don't look at it as a $150 job, because as I said, and as I advise, you shouldn't do just a fret job and not do a setup on top of it. So you will be charging more than that.
The setup is being done regardless of that.
Yeah.
You're not charging $150. You're not charging $260 for the Plek machine, because you're getting the $150 whether you set up the guitar or not. And you're doing it before. The Plek machine is not doing the setup for you. So you're not getting the $150 because, or the $110 because you're using the Plek machine, and the Plek machine's not earning you $110.
No.
The Plek machine's earning you 150.
The other thing too is, Doug, you have to remember that you're Doug proper, and I can't imagine that you're going to charge 150 for it. I would think something more along the lines of
I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to get to the numbers of where.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Doug, get you one and charge 350.
I already charged 375 for a level. So
well, and the other thing too is, Ian, how long does it take you to chuck that guitar up into the machine? Like,
chuck it in there?
Yeah, like
it does not take a minute.
I mean, think about all the fussing around to do on a getting it into the neck jig, Doug. I mean, that thing just looks like you just like set it in there and it's ready to go. Just imagine.
I get it. I understand. When I'm using a neck jig and I'm doing a level and a crown, I'm at about a 45-minute process.
Yeah.
When I'm putting it out of the neck jig, it's about a 25-minute.
Plus with this thing, like you got the minutes involved in it or whatever. And then when the machine gets going, you could be somewhere smoking cigarettes while you're waiting for it to be done, or be profitable on other jobs. It's your choice.
No, I get that. I understand the convenience of it. I understand the accuracy of it. I understand that it's doing stuff while you're doing stuff. I gather all of that. I was just trying to process the numbers versus the incurring liability.
So
I decided to buy one when I had like a 4-month waiting list for repairs. I haven't solved that problem, still the same thing, but I started moving my pricing up for fret dressing and setup to a point where I could afford a Plek machine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's when I got there that like, well, it looks like I actually can do this because I am charging the price that I would be charging, and I have the work lined up. It is lined up. It's just I wish I could do it faster.
Yes. Can I answer that one, Ian?
Yes.
I'll answer that one. Yes, they do. You have to come up with, you got to feed these guys for 3 days. You get 3 days of their undivided attention on helping you figure out how to use the thing.
Ian, and they're usually 12 to 14 hour days is what they are.
Ian, like, are you cutting any corners on that if you're already kind of like hip to 3D stuff? If you've been operating CNCs and stuff like that, is there any dissipation of the learning curve, or is it just like all hands on deck synaptically?
I have never been anywhere where we had loose time. Yeah. There's always something to talk about, and there's always a rabbit hole for us to go down, and there's always value for us to offer.
On the economic side too, maintenance. What's your yearly cutter sharpening and I mean, are there Zerks on there that need to be greased or anything? Are there?
So maintenance is every 5 years, done by one of us technicians, and it takes a full day to do the maintenance. Mm-hmm. Sharpening, if you're a busy shop, you're going to go through two blades in a year, and I'll have to check how much that is. You're probably going to spend, let's say, $600 per year for 2 blades. Cutters? Because there is shipping and that fun stuff. But the sharpening fee was we changed the whole structure just a couple of months ago, so I don't have the numbers off the top of my head anymore. But it's you can expect a couple $100 per.
Also, in moving, so you field stripped one of those. Is it possible to get them into small spaces by complete disassembly, or is that not?
That would be it's more economical in time to disassemble the space than the machine.
Okay.
So yes, walls did have to come down, and painting did have to be done.
You had to do that. All right.
I had to do that.
So I'd rather do that than go talk to a guy at the bank. So put on a suit, go down there with a business plan, get out of here.
Yeah.
So what else? Anybody?
So your monthly maintenance on a thing, that was for the support plan for that?
So it's not it's your support, a monthly support fee, which, as I said, you are not obliged to opt into. just that if you do request support and you're not opted in, you'll be paying for each phone call and each assistance. Whereas if you do opt in, well, then you've got 2 hours of, we can talk about anything you want.
Wait a second. Do I owe you money for a support plan now? What's going on? Okay. Ian, we've had you for an hour and 20 minutes. This has been great, man. I'm gonna go last call for questions, or do you have anything that you want to add? Do you feel like there's anything we haven't covered?
No, I think just the most important thing I wanted to convey is that you can learn a lot from the machine, and it is a much more versatile tool than initially thought. And I hope I was able to convey that message.
I think I mean, I don't know if like I said, I don't know if I'm going to be, putting on a suit and marching down to, beg a bank for money anytime soon. But I think you've convinced me that it definitely is a thing. Like I came into this with just nothing but, 10 years of folklore and skepticism. So I think I'm more on board for having you do this.
I do have a question from the fretwork side of things, or just from the shop side of things. Here in New York, there's a fairly, I don't know how dense it is, but there are a few machines in our backyard. If you throw your baseball far enough, and we've seen a number of guitars that have come from both manufacturers and nearby, let's say, shops that are running Pleks that have had to have some pretty significant fretwork once they landed here. And from customers saying, well, what are you talking about? This was just Plek at, I won't name the shop. What from the standpoint of somebody who obviously knows how to use this machine very well, where do you attribute that to? Because that's been a head scratcher for quite some time.
Yeah, I can back Doug up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As Plek, and
I don't want to throw rocks. I don't want to throw rocks at any window.
No, that's how they did the fretwork with rock.
I did have this kind of question too. Because I've heard it from a couple places too, but has Plek ever had to pull a machine from somebody and just say, look,
we can't, they're privately owned.
Okay.
They're privately owned, and Gibson's made our life very difficult because for years and years we all know what Plek Gibsons looked like in 2012.
Not good.
I'm also talking about individual shops. I know manufacturers, I've often said, just as a colloquialism to people, that, and it may be a, and I don't mean it as a pejorative, but a Plek machine will make a horrible fret shop, pretty darn good. It'll make a pretty darn good fret shop pretty darn good, and it'll make an awesome fret shop pretty darn good. Now, I don't mean to cast aspersions at the glass doors of the fret, or to throw rocks at the glass doors of the Plek machine, but and with somebody who's thinking about it as deeply as you are, and has gotten like as deeply into the numbers as you have, I can see where it informs your fretwork as much as you are bringing to the process. But going back to my question of a lot of those shops outside of manufacturers, because I know in a manufacturing setting, you're dealing with a lot of, for the lack of a better word, a lot of good enoughism, and there's a big difference between Monday afternoon and after lunch on Friday in almost every department. But for the Plek jobs that I've seen, that I think we're talking about, they were coming from individual shops of guys running a Plek. So how, with your experience of the machine, how do you, and I'm not asking you to explain it on their behalf, but is there a reason or justification that there is as much variety in quality coming out of the doors of the Plek as there are just
my biggest challenge with both manufacturers and small shops is that they they want to treat their machine as a vending machine, and they think that because they've paid this price, it takes a lot of responsibility off of them. Jigging and fixturing. I remember this one shop that kept calling me, and man, he was bitching and moaning that he spent so much money on this machine and the frets were not coming out level. And it took me quite a few phone calls with him to make him understand that loose frets are loose frets. And if you don't glue them in, you can throw a Plek machine at it, you can throw a neck jig at it, you can throw a Doug Proper at it. Your frets are not going to get level if you don't secure them.
But Ian, if a guy is all the way, you know, buying a Plek machine and he can't detect loose frets, I mean, it's really hopeless at that point. Like
it is, but unfortunately or fortunately, Plek is a private enterprise,
yeah.
which makes its money off of selling machines and then supporting said machines, so primarily off of the sale of machines. So it's very rare that we have to say, no, you can't buy one. I mean, we're not Rolls Royce. We can't pick our customers like that.
You know, Doug, I mean, the thing is I have a feeling that there's a lot of people out there doing the same thing with the neck jig, you know, like the neck jig.
Exactly. I was going to say that owning a neck jig does not make you a good fretter. Doesn't.
No, I understand that, sure.
And it's the same with a Plek machine. It does not make you a good fretter. And if you are not open to interpreting what you see on the screen, I had one guy tell me, you know, it made no sense. He would take an intake scan and go, yes, this guitar is completely screwed up. I'm going to process it. And I trust that I can see that it's completely screwed up. And then it still wasn't quite perfect on the final scan, but now he didn't trust the data anymore. So he trusted on the intake, but not on the final scan.
Ian, okay. I got one last question. I noticed that you don't say process. Are you sure you're Canadian?
I told you I'm French.
Is that the French Canadian pronunciation?
Maybe.
All right.
And also, one thing I don't do, unlike many places that own Plek machines, I don't Plek guitars. I don't market it that way. I don't say Plek to my customers.
Oh,
interesting. I refer it to fretwork. I refer it to as a fret dress. I do not refer to it as Plekking.
I think that's very interesting. I think that's good.
Because I simply don't believe you can brand somebody's ability or somebody's end result based on the tool that they have. You can't. Because I'm sure, Doug, if we were to scan a couple of your jobs in here, they'd be pretty damn close to perfect. I'm sure. The idea of someone like you getting it is being able to deliver that level of perfection at a much higher rate. And, you know, crowning the frets on a 24 fret Jackson is not the same gig as it is on a Martin. Unless you have a Plek machine, then it's exactly the same gig.
I understand, sure. But then I'd have to take up smoking.
No, actually, it's allowed me to focus on so many other things in my craft. Like I have a mill, I have a lathe, I have a spray booth, and I have been able to focus on developing abilities there because I'm not crowning frets all day long.
Let's just come right out and say it. Crowning frets sucks. Like it really sucks. By the way, have you seen my pneumatic crowning file? I'm really proud of that. But yeah, crowning frets sucks. Like $100,000 to never go back and forth with a crowning file again. I've been able to figure out how to blend UV cured polyester over polyurethane. I've been able to figure out how to do that because I wasn't spending my days crowning frets. I can actually machine Floyd Rose nuts in my mill, which are Rockwell 60. And I paid for the mill, thanks to this guy first. And I actually had the time to figure out how to do this because Christopher was working while I was working. So I'm sure I've been doing this for 17 years, nowhere near as long as you guys, but I'm sure that even after 30 years, I'll still find rabbit holes to go down and learn new trades, new skills. And this affords me the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing you at Northwoods. Remember when we talked outside?
Yeah.
And you went and did what you said you were. Good for you.
I'm a stubborn son of a bitch.
Dan, I don't see. Oh, there you are. Cool.
Hey, Ian Davlin.
Yes, sir.
You have to make us a promise.
What's that?
You have to have Weston back so he can show us the rest of his shop.
Yeah, we should do that. I like that we got the Plek thing, but I think we're leaving money on the table, not getting a full treatment of your entire operation. Would you agree to come back and do a shop tour at some point?
Sure, I can do all sorts of stuff. I said I do UV cured poly, I do lacquer, got a spray booth, got a machine shop, got a wood shop. If it's going to be done on a guitar, I do it here.
Awesome. Well, everybody unmute and give Ian a very big thank you. Like I said, I think I like this thing. I don't know that it's in my future, but I'm going to stop talking shit about it. So I hope that's a win.
Done. My work has been done here.
All right, everybody have a good rest of your Sunday, and say thank you to Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Ian. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Later.
Hopefully I'll be able to come see you in the flesh one day.
Yeah, man. All right, take care, guys.
See y'all.